Moshe, we're good? Excellent. Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome. Today's class is graciously dedicated by Dr. Daniel Grober. Thank you very much, Dr. Grober, and a lot of blessings and success in all, and thank you for your partnership. We started the Maamar Lehavin Inyan Habrachas to understand the concepts of blessings in Torah, Parshas Bereishis. We're up to page 12, the paragraph Va'ata Novay Lebiur Inyan Bais Brachas Rishonos Shel Nisuyin. The second paragraph on the page 12. In the Hebrew, it's Vav, column 3. Dav Vav, column 3. We started a few lines last time. It was a long introduction. So I'll just start from the paragraph again. I'll start over again. Va'ata now, after everything explained before, which we discussed in the previous classes, Naveh will come, Lebiur Inyan Bais Brachas Rishonos Shel Nisuyin. We're going to come to explain the first two brachas, the first two blessings of Nisuyin, of marriage, when someone gets married, whether today we do it under the chuppah or during the Sheva brachas. So the first two blessings that are connected to marriage, you have the blessing Beide Pri Agaf, and you have the blessing Shakal Bara Lechvayda. But he says Beis Brachas Rishonos Shel Nisuyin that are directly connected to marriage. Hashem Yotzera Adam, Vashe Yotzera Adam B'Tzalmai. The first is Yotzera, because I was wondering, he says Beis Brachas Rishonos Shel Nisuyin, you have Shakal Bara Lechvayda. But L'chayda, his diuk is Beis Brachas Rishonos Shel Nisuyin. In other words, the first two brachas that deal directly with marriage. Because Yotzera Adam is, he formed Adam, and as we'll see what that means. And then you have the second one, Asher Yatzeres Adam B'Tzalmai, B'Tzelem Mustav Nisai, which literally means he formed the Adam in his image. V'hiskin Leimemenu Binyan Adayat, and he developed from him, he fixed from him, he created from him a binyan, an edifice, Adayad, which would be for eternity. That's why when they're a wedding, they wish people a binyan Adayad, that it should be a binyan, an edifice, Adayad, forever, for eternity. Just like Adam and Chava's binyan, the binyan they created together is Adayad, generation after generation, till the end of all the generations. So v'hiskin leimenu binyanad baruch atah Hashem, again Yotzera Adam. So these are the first two blessings. Harishayna peiseches bebarach ve'ena chesemes, v'hashniya peiseches bebarach v'chesemes bebarach. The first bracha, the first blessing, opens up with baruch. It doesn't conclude with baruch. We say baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam Yotzer ha'adam. There's no baruch at the end. The second one begins with baruch and concludes with baruch. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam asher yatzer Adam b'Tzalmai b'Tzalmai mustav nisai v'hiskin lo mimenu binyan adayad. And then you finish baruch atah Hashem Yotzer Adam. V'ha'inyan. So one is called matbeya katzer and one is called matbeya aruch, as we said before. You have two types of blessings. You have a matbeya katzer, which doesn't end with baruch, and you have a matbeya aruch, which begins and ends with baruch. So in the previous section, he explained there was two types of brachas. Every bracha has the same objective, to bring into the consciousness and to revelation the Amunah and the Ein Sof, as he discussed earlier, the difference of the first Beis HaMikdash and the second Beis HaMikdash. But one bracha is connected more to Alma de Iskasya, one to Alma de Isgalia. One is where the details are not fleshed out yet, everything is more in potentiality, like the seed of the tree. And one is connected to the world that's fleshed out in details, which over there you always need protection, you always need a chasima. Like he explained why the word is chaisim, not messiahim. Yeah, you remember, because chaisim is from the word chasima, a signature, a seal, which protects the letter, for example, a letter that's sealed, or anything that's sealed, a jug of wine, a jug of oil, like we have in the Hanukkah story, protects it from a stranger or somebody who's not supposed to have contact. And if they do have contact, you could see that the seal is broken. This was the symbol that there was contact. In other words, that somebody touched it. Because the seal was broken, the seal is not there. So why is that the word? The word should have been Messiah Baruch, not Chaisim Baruch. You're not sealing Baruch, you're finishing. See, the word is Siyum, L'Sayem. Chaisim doesn't only mean an end, Chaisim means a seal, a signature. Like you have in the Megillah Esther, right? Ksav asher nichtav, b'kshem hamelech, v'nechtam b'tabas hamelech. V'nechtam, it's sealed with the ring of the king. That shows the seal. And that's what he says, no, because when you understand the deeper element of Baruch, at the end, it's a chasima, it's a chaisim. It's a protection of the integrity that the water doesn't The energy doesn't leak into the wrong places. He said that's why the end is always crucial. Haboicher ba'ama Yisrael ba'ava, for example. Agav, it's just interesting, this is also brought in Chassidus, that the word chaisim is the same letters like two other words. One is chaimas, and the other one is tchum. It's all the same letters. Chaisim, chaimas, tchum. It's all the same thing, right? What's a chaima? Chaima is a fortress. It's a wall that protects a city. And the reason is, again, so to be able to protect it from the enemy or from any alien force that comes and wants to penetrate it. That's the chaima. Shivasa b'Tammuz we fast because nifritza ha'ir, the walls of the city were breached. When walls are breached, it can be a very dangerous thing because the one outside the wall is not your best friend. It's true in everybody's life. You know, you always have to know when the door should be opened and when the door should be closed. So that's chaimas. And then you have tchum. Tchum is the same thing. Like, for example, you have tchum Shabbos. What's tchum Shabbos? Tchum Shabbos is that on Shabbos you're allowed to walk throughout a whole city, and then once you leave the city, right, if there's no other city nearby or there's no other houses nearby, you're going out to a highway or to the wilderness, whatever, there's a certain tchum, which is 2,000 amas. So that's the tchum Shabbos. It's like a border of Shabbos that's a border around the city. See, Ad Kan Tchum Shabbos, the Gemara says a story in Chagig about Reb Meir that he was, Elisha ben Avuya was riding on a horse on Shabbos and Reb Meir was following him because Elisha ben Avuya was teaching Torah while he was horseback riding on Shabbos. And Elisha ben Avuya at some point told Reb Meir he should go back. Why should he go back? Because while he was teaching, he was also counting the footsteps of the horse. And he said, it's Tchum Shabbos already. Ad Kan Tchum Shabbos. You're a religious guy, you got to go back. Chemas, mit Hagar, mit Mishmal, Chemas Mayim. Then there's also Shvei Chamascha. Yeah. V'mayim lehem chayma, steht in Medrash, v'mayim lehem chayma, right? The waters got angry. V'mayim lehem chayma. But these two words, I'm just saying, you see that chaysim, which he explains as the seal, is also chaymas, and it's also tchum. It's all the same nekunda. It's the boundaries that protect it. So this is matbeya katzer versus matbeya arach, as explained earlier. So now we see that these two blessings in marriage, in Sheva Brachas, have this quality. One has a baruch in the beginning, not at the end. The other one has baruch in both. It's matbeya arach. To understand this, the Gemara Kislev Daf Chesam Aleph Ein Sham. Sometimes he just writes a reference, but here he adds Ein Sham. Look over there, because the sugya over there is intricate. We started to discuss it last time. Gemara explains Kislev Amru Shabeis Yitziris Halalu Keneged Shtei Yitziris Shaya B'Adam Erish. He says that these two Yitziris, these two, why do we say twice Yitzir Adam? How many times was Adam formed? Once. So why is that two blessings Yitzir Adam? The answer is it's Keneged Shtei Yitziris Shaya B'Adam Erish. It represents two Yitziris, two creations that happened with the first Adam, with Adam. Tchila Nivra Adam Levada B'du Partzufim. V'achakach Nasan HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Chava. He doesn't go through here the whole arichas in the Gemara. I said it last time, but the Nekud over there was that the Gemara tells a story, you remember, of two Amirayim, Levi and Rabbi, and they had a machlaik. They did, each one of them did Sheva Brachas differently. One skipped out Yotzei Adam, and therefore only had 6 blessings together with Hagafen, or 5 blessings without Hagafen. And the other one did both of the Yotzers. Yeah. So the Gemara asks why. What was the machlaikas? So the Gemara has two perspectives. One perspective is that if there was one Yitzira, there were 2 Yitziras. What does that mean if there was one Yitzira or 2 Yitziras? If there was one Yitzira, so you only do Yotzei Adam. In other words, Adam and Chava were created as one, Zachar and Nekeva Baram, so it's only one Yitzira. So then it's, or you say no, that there were 2 separate Yitziras. There was Adam, and then there was a separate Yitzira as Chava. A separate formation. True, from Adam, but a separate entity called Chava. So it was a special Yitzira for Chava. So if it was one, so there's only one Yotzei Adam, there's no 2 Yotzei Adams. So that was the opinion of the one who skipped the first Yetzer, just did the second Yetzer. Or skipped the second Yetzer, just did the first. And then the second opinion is, no, there were two Yetziras. And then the Gemara rejects it and says, you don't have to say this. You could say that everybody holds there was one Yetzirah of Zachar and Nekeva together. But there was a Machshava and there was a Maisa. What do we mean Machshava and a Maisa? There was the plan, the dream, and then there was the implementation. The Maisa, Adam and Chava, essentially are one. In other words, originally they're one, they're together. But L'Poyel, in reality at the end, Hashem wants them to be separate. That was the Machshava. So even if L'Maisa, they're created as one, Zachar and Nekeva Baram. Nonetheless, in Machshava, his plan was they shouldn't remain one. They should remain and become two separate entities, two distinct entities. That was the plan. So if you go according to the Maisa, so it's one bracha. If you're going to the Machshava, it's two because they were separated. At the end, they were separated. Adam and Chava are not one anymore. A man is separate, a woman is separate. They get married and they become one again. That's what the Gemara says. So one Amayra went according to the Machshava, and therefore it's two, because the blueprint, the idea was they should be separated. And the other one said, no, according to the Maisa, they were one. Huh? No, yeah, you're right. At the end, there was two, of course. But the question is Yotzer. In other words, should you say, the formation. Should you say one Yotzer or two Yotzers? So in Machshava, he formed two. I don't want one, I want two. But in Maisa, there was a oneness. However you explain that oneness. And as a result of that, you say one Yotzer. Later, there's a separation. The Tzemach Tzedek has his footnotes on this Maamar, and one of his Maamarim, so he says there, it's very hard to understand the shitta that Machshava prevails over Maisa. In other words, God also knew what he wanted, so he could have also separated Adam and Chava initially. Just like all the other species. He created a horse. There was a female horse and a male horse. Female lion and a male lion. Everything was males and females. He also knew about his Machshava. Why does the shitta hold? And that's a halacha that the Machshava prevails over the Maisa. So the Tzemach Tzedek brings from the Ponim Yafis. The Ponim Yafis, the Baal HaFla actually, his name was Pinchas Horovitz, Pinchas Alevi Ish Horovitz. His grandson is sometimes here. The Horovitzes are from him. Some of the Horovitzes. The Boston Einiklach. So he's known as the Baal HaFla. He wrote a sefer on Maseches Ksuvas called Hafla, on Maseches Kiddushin. I'm sorry, on Ksuvas, on Kiddushin Hamakna, and on Ksuvas Hafla. And he has a sefer on Chumash called Ponim Yafis. Reb Pinchas Halevi Ish Horovitz. Hafla is Harav Pinchas Levi Ish Horovitz. He was the Rav of Frankfurt in Germany, and he was a student of the Maggid of Mezrich. The Boston Rebbe, Rabbi Horovitz, Rabbi Levi Horovitz was a grandson, and here there's one of the Einiklach also comes a lot, Rabbi Horovitz. Yeah. He wasn't. He was a student of the Maggid of Mezrich. So how does he end up by the Yekkes? That's a good question. Very good, shlichus. Okay. But the way the shlichus came about was an interesting thing. In that generation, there was a divorce known as the Get of Kliva. The Get of Kliva was one of the most, I spoke about it once, Tisha B'Av, was one of the most controversial stories that happened then. There was a divorce that was given in Kliva in Germany. And there were those who wanted to debate that they said it wasn't a kosher get because the husband was mentally challenged when he gave the get. It became a huge question. Can the woman remarry or not? Did she get a get or not? And it tore the Jewish world apart. I mean, it was a huge fight. Most rabbis believed it was a good get. But the Rav of Frankfurt, his name was Rabbi Avram Avish, he was a lone soldier, and he fought ferociously against the get. And it became a huge fight. It was a crazy conflict. To those who say that the reason that the Haskalah, the Enlightenment, became so powerful in Germany was because the respect for rabbis was eroded from the get of Kliva. That and Shapsi Tzvi story. I mean, that's what some say. It was a huge fight, a huge machlekes. And Rabbi Avram Avish, he was one of only opinions against the get. And because it was such a big fight, he passed away shortly after. I don't know if it was a cause of that or not, but he passed away shortly after. And the community was so furious that they made a condition that nobody who fought against him could become rabbi in Frankfurt. The problem is they couldn't find a rabbi. So they had to go to Eastern Europe and find a chassid, a Talmud of the Maggid of Mezrich, to become the rabbi of Frankfurt. So it was a very unusual shidduch. I guess God wanted him to be the rabbi of Frankfurt. But so that's how the Pinchas Hodovitz became the rabbi of Frankfurt. Somebody asked me, Taka, that you don't see in his Panim Yafis and in his Sfarim that he quotes Chassidus so much, even though he was one of the greatest students of the Maggid. So I said it could be he was by the Yekes, and he had to know, how to speak to them. Just like the Chaim Sofer was a student of him. Chaim Sofer also doesn't quote Chassidus a lot, but the Chaim Sofer you see a lot of Chassidus Shaverter, because his Rebbe was the Baal HaFlah and Reb Nosson Adler. The Baal HaFlah was a student of the Maggid, but the Chaim Sofer was an Eibelender. You had to know how to speak to your community if they should be receptive to you. I don't know, but could be. Stop. I'll call upon him. In the introduction to Shulchan Aruch of the Alter Rebbe, Shulchan Aruch Harav, the children write that it was Reb Pinchas Horovitz and his brother Reb Shmelka of Niklisburg who were very, very instrumental in empowering the Alter Rebbe to write Shulchan Aruch Harav. They were older than him, and they were Mizrich, and they were considered the Goinim of the generation, the two brothers, Reb Shmelka of Niklisburg and Reb Pinchas Horovitz. Reb Shmelka was a Rav in Niklisburg, and he was in Frankfurt. So it says they saw some of his writings, I think Hilchas Pesach, it's in the introduction of Shulchan Aruch Harav, and they were so enthralled and overwhelmed, they pushed him very much to do it. The Maggid told him to write the Shulchan Aruch, but they were very instrumental in motivating him, because he was very young. I'll call upon him. So the Tzemach Tzedek says, he writes in one of the Maamar that I saw Tirutz Amiti, I saw a real answer from the Baal HaFlah on this Gemara. He says it's a Tirutz Amiti. It's a big compliment. It's an authentic answer. You have answers, people give answers. As they say, the question is still better than the answer. Here he says it's a Tirutz Amiti that he gives it. I guess it's a Maseches Kedushin over there. I mean, in his Pirush and Ksuvah, sorry. So he brings from him that he says, you talk about machshava and ma'aseh, it doesn't mean like we think, I have a plan, right? But in action, I'm doing it a different way. So then, Vayeitzei means he created. So do what he created. His plan, I know his plan. His plan was later to separate them. But that's not Vayeitzei. Right? The machshava was when he was creating them as one, I want them to be separate. Okay? Got it? But that God also knew that. But L'Poyel, he wanted to create them as one. So why are you making two Vayeitzers? If it's good for him to do one, so you can also do one of the bracha. Why is the machshava prevailing over the ma'aseh? So the Panim Yafis says that's not what it means. It means much more edel. Machshava doesn't mean it's a thought that I want to do ultimately at the end, but not right now. Machshava means a different dimension of reality. And the way he puts it there is there's the guf of Adam and Chava and there's the neshama of Adam and Chava. The neshama of Adam and Chava were always separate. He created them as separate. In other words, their creation from a level of machshava, their internal consciousness was two separate beings. Initially, it was two separate beings. When you speak about Zachor and Nekeva Barim as one, you're talking about the physical dimension, yeah? The physical dimension of the guf, that there was one and then separated. Again, however you want to explain that physically. But spiritually, they were always two. Initially, they were two. They were created as two entities. When they're one in their body, they're not one in their soul. Even when they're one, they're two separate beings, because that was the plan, that was the machshava. The internal state of Adam and Chava is two separate beings. And that's what you make, that's why you make two brachas. You're not only talking about the guf, you're talking about the neshama. The yitzira of the neshama was two neshamas. Even though everything comes from one, but here there was a split in the soul between the male and the female, in Adam and Chava. So what this means is, and that's what the Gemara is saying, and that's Taka da Halacha, we say two brachas, we don't say one bracha. So as we said last time, it's also representing two ideas, and that's what we're going to discuss now. If the focus is their oneness, or the focus is their distinctiveness, their separation. So now let's see weiter. So that's what he says. The word nasa means separated chava. So she's a separate entity. Okay. Chuli.
Does marriage not bind the neshamas? Two married people, the neshamas aren't one?
It says in Zohar that a husband and a wife is plagufa. It's like a half a body, half a soul.
It's almost like the end.
Of course, but you're binding two people. You're right. Everything is one. When you say two halves of one soul, he doesn't mean a split that's essential, that it's two souls that are not connected. He means that it comes out ultimately as two entities. You have to bring together the two halves. It's two halves of one soul, but each one on its own is an entity, right? You can have a single man and a single woman. A person is single doesn't mean they don't have a life. You know, sometimes it's something that we talk about marriage, but it's important. The Gemara says, the Gemara speaks in the Yavamas, the whole value of marriage and everything. But a person, even before marriage or after marriage, is still a person. It's not like a woman and a man is supposed to feel that if they're not married, I'm just a half a person walking and I'm not a person. There's something special about marriage, the completion, the plaguf, etc. But it's a self-contained soul. It's a self-contained soul that it's in a relationship with another soul. So when you say half, half means because when you speak of half a soul, it's not like, you took the cookie, you cut it into half, and now you have a broken cookie. It means that there's a deeper wholeness that the neshama gets through the other. But a person has a soul. It's not like when a person is single, then it's not a person. The Gemara says, Takakal Mish, the Gemara speaks about that. Adam, is full Adam, Zachar and Nekeva together. But it means, in other words, and that's what it means, that it was split. It was split means that it's his neshama and her neshama. In practical words, it means that it's a little bit of a sensitive idea, but the wholeness of a person, the inner wholeness of a person, I have to find in myself. I can't get it from somebody else. Not even a husband and a wife. Sometimes a person thinks, I'm wounded, I'm blemished, I'm tattered, I'm scathed. I got married, my wife will complete me. Or the other way around, right? My husband is going to complete me. And it's beautiful words, but it's a sensitive topic. It's true. A husband and a wife complete each other, no question. The Gemara says that's when you called Adam. Zachar nekeva bana vayikra shmam Adam. But you have to know what that means. They say a joke. There was a woman who said, before I was married, I was incomplete. Now I'm married and I'm finished. So, it's just a joke. Maybe it's not a joke, I don't know. You're sighing so early in the morning already. He says, it is a joke. He says, it's not a joke. I'm not going to ask you why. Manda Amar Azai, he has his pasuk, he has his pasuk, whatever, yeah. Vayeitzei matzah. What's the inyan here? We once spoke about this. There's two types of things. There's something called craving and there's something called desire. Craving comes from a place of a void. I have a void and I want to fill the void. Desire comes from wholeness. I'm whole, and because I'm whole, I want to expand. I desire. There's a big difference. When there's a void, I need you to fill that void. So I have a craving to you because I need you to fill that void. If you're not available, for example, or you're having a hard day and you can't fill that void, so the void not only is it there, it gets even stronger. Right? Because now I made a bid for connection, I reached out, and boom, instead of filling the void, right, you shot a bullet into it. So now the void is much stronger and the distance is much deeper. And this is what constantly happens in marriage. Right? Anybody can relate to this? And it's a very normal thing. This is you're not unique. This is human behavior. But as we grow, and hopefully we grow in life, we want to reach a much deeper space. And the deeper space is your void you fill from within yourself. Your soul fills your void. When you're in the flow, in other words, when you're a channel for the energy force that comes through you, there's pain. But I need to fill my void. In fact, I'm the only one who could fill my void, because my soul could fill my void. Your soul, even if you're the nicest person in the world, you can't fill my void. You can't fill it. So when people live off other people, even if it's not manipulative and exploitive, it's kind, it's nice. I don't mean live off that I'm just trying to deplete your energy. But ultimately, you can't fill my void. You could fill void, I could fill my void. So now, when I reach out for connection, it's coming from desire, not from craving. It's not desperation. So now, if you're having a hard day, or you're having a difficult hour, and you can't be there, it doesn't destroy me. It doesn't create a situation where my void gets even worse and stronger and there's more distance. Rather, I can appreciate the fact that, yeah, I had this desire, right now this desire can't be met. But when the person is in a state of expansiveness, of fullness, they want to share their love, they want to give their love, they also want to receive love, but it's like a cherry on the cake to expand the powerful energy force that there is in that. So now if the person is having a difficult moment, I can empathize, right? And I could say, okay, whatever, for whatever reason, I can have empathy. There could also be a pain there. But the pain is not that you destroyed me, because I'm not living off you. This is a much more evolved state of consciousness. You understand what I'm saying? And now it's hard. It's not easy. It's not easy because we look to others to fill our voids, just like we look to things to fill our voids. We look to our phones to fill our voids. We look to tzatskes, we look for money, we look for validation, we look for a lot of things to fill our void. But those are all, like we always say, those are all distractions. They're not ever going to really fill the void. The inner void that I'm feeling, only one can fill, only Hashem can fill it, and that means my Hashem, not even your Hashem, right? Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. Your God can't fill my void. On a level of Sevav Kalalman, it's one, but on a level of Mamala Kalalman, my God has to fill my void, my soul. It's my energy force. It's my soul and my guf. It's your soul and your guf. So as much as there is connection, and that is so powerful and critical, connection also requires the respect for separation. Separation is not that we love separation. Separation is not fragmentation. Separation is distinctiveness. Distinctiveness means you have your life force and I have my life force. Not everything is the same, right? In the source, everything is one. But the way it comes out, there's Adam and there's Chava. So as much as Adam and Chava become one, they also need to respect the fact that they're not one. And that's important in their oneness. Because if my oneness doesn't respect the fact that we're not one, so then the oneness only touches that part of you that is one with me. The part of you that's separate, I can't, I'm just getting annoyed with that. Like, why do you have to be different than me? And this is what happens. You understand what I'm saying? This is more important than a lot of people realize. Then I'm getting annoyed. Why are you different than me? In other words, the oneness is only touching the part of you that's one with me. But that's not the truth. The truth is that the separateness is an essential part of the relationship. That's what it means that you go according to the machshava. The fact that Adam and Chava were designed not to be one, but to be two. That is an essential part of the relationship because that's a oneness that incorporates and respects the distinctiveness and the boundaries of the other person. And it takes a lot of confidence inside because to really respect otherness, you have to be able to be fine with yourself. Right? Like you are you, and it doesn't take away from I being I. It's simply, I know it sounds simple. What's the big deal? You're you and I am I. But we know emotionally it's not so simple. You are you and I am I. And when the you and the I could connect from a you and an I, that's a much deeper connection. And for that, you recognize your oneness, but the oneness is recognized through and with the separateness. And therefore there's moments, Vayeitzei Yaakov levadai, there's moments that ultimately I need to respect the fact that there's differences, and not everybody has to be the same and have the same personality and have the same opinion, have the same perspective. Like we say in Gemara, Elu ve'elu, divrei Elokim Chaim, it's different manifestations of divine energy. So on one hand you say it's two halves of one soul, that's true. But you're also saying it's two halves. You don't just say it's one soul. It's one soul, it's one soul. It's two halves. And each half is a self-contained half. It's not a half that's just a broken, miserable half. So I'm miserable till I get married. When I get married, you make me unmiserable. People who are miserable before marriage are very often miserable in marriage and after marriage. It's just in marriage they have somebody to blame, that's it. I mean, before marriage they blame one person, in the middle of marriage they blame another person, after marriage they have a third person to blame. Nobody can rescue anybody from their misery. It doesn't work that way. There's no such a thing. It just doesn't happen that way.
They're miserable because they're lonely.
That's a deep question. What if somebody is miserable because they're lonely? Right.
I mean, outside, there might be other factors as well. But if, let's say everything else is going well, and the only factor is they're happy besides the fact that they're still single as 35, 40, whatever the amount of the age is. So that's the miserable that they have.
Right. Right. So I think, I think we have to understand this with we have to say with a lot of sensitivity and empathy. But ultimately, if somebody is miserable in their loneliness, if they're and their word is miserable, I don't think somebody else can fill that. They need to be able to find their inner wholeness. Nobody else can let's forget about marriage for a moment, okay? Just talk about friendship. Right. If somebody's, I'm just looking for a friend, be my friend, be my friend, be my friend. It's very hard to be a friend for somebody who has no identity outside of you being their friend, right? In fact, somebody once said a very good line. That sometimes we find I forgot the line, but the teichen was sometimes we find our deepest friendships when we could let go of the need to have a friend and living a life where I'm just not being me in order to please people, so I should be able to have friends. Right? Because real friendship means that I'm connecting to a friend. But if there's no I, and the friend is going to save my I and rescue my I and give me an I, so if that friend is healthy, it's probably going to be very, very hard for that friend. We're just like feeding off each other. And that's what happens sometimes in friendships. There's a lot of toxicity going on where people are just feeding off each other's energy and therefore they don't respect their boundaries. Like whenever there's a friendship and you can't stop thinking about them and you can't afford them to have separate space, to something off. And you have sometimes, it's like a crush, it's like an intense crush, and you have these types of friendships, like you cannot, it's a codependency, and I can't have them be independent, and I can't have them be separate. And I have to know, and if they do something that I don't know about, it's like, oh my God, and I'm hiring the FBI and the Mossad, to find out why they went yesterday to New Jersey. Behind my back. And it was behind my back, yeah. And if they have another friend, oy, Rachmana litzlan, right? Now you're cheating, yeah, so to speak. So whenever we see, now these are normal emotions, people have them, but we have to ask ourselves what's happening. So there's an obsession here. In other words, I need you to fill me. I can't wake up without you. I can't go to sleep without you. And it can become an obsession. And the obsession is that I really don't like myself. I don't like myself. And therefore, I feel that you are my wholeness. You're my completion.
There's a difference in miserable.
So it's a different type of miserable.
We could be lacking.
Yeah, right. I may be lacking. And from my fullness, I desire to have an expansive life. Love is natural to the soul. The soul is love. The soul is a manifestation of love. The soul is connected. The soul wants to connect from a place of desire. It's like a cherry on the cake. Because I'm so full, because I'm so happy, I want to share that with somebody else. It's like somebody who comes home and they're full of light and love and they want to share it with their children. They want to share it with their spouse. They want to share it with their friend. They want to. They want to expand the field and the electromagnetic spectrum of spiritual light. They want to expand it. There's so much light, right? So they want to expand it. It's coming from a completely different place. And it's tremendously fulfilling. It's tremendously fulfilling. And there's a pain in the lack of it, right? If somebody has a very deep relationship and the relationship terminates on some level, it's a very, very deep pain. And sometimes someone who doesn't know love doesn't even know the pain of that separation. Right? In fact, some people perhaps don't feel love. They don't allow themselves to feel love because they don't want to be disappointed when it's terminated. Because it's hard. It's very, very hard. So I think so all of this is so why are we saying all of this? So this is important to understand that Adam and Chava at the chuppah, when we say two separate brachas for Adam and Chava, we're discussing the fact, as the Panim Yafas says, that they're one, but in machshava, in a deeper place, the whole point is that there's a oneness that's going to come out in separateness, and they're still going to be one. So now you'll ask a question, so God should just create them as two. Don't create them as one. Don't make all these problems, just create them as two, and then everybody would say you make two brachas. Why is there a machlokes? The answer, of course, is because the question is, what type of oneness is it going to be? If they would be created lechatchila completely as two separate entities, as Adam and as Chava, if you want to use it above Ram's scientific model, you could say Chava's chromosomes weren't taken from Adam's chromosomes. It wasn't Adam's X chromosomes replicated as a double X. It was just a separate entity. This the Ramban writes, then ultimately, the Ramban says by animals, you don't really have the concept of marriage. You have mating, but not marriage. Most animals, in fact, are not monogamous, meaning they can have many, many different mates. In one season they can have dozens and dozens. There are a few, like you have the dove. You have a few, swan, that are very loyal to their mate. Because the concept is, it's a reproductive function. It's a function, right? The female, the male, it's a function that embedded in their DNA is we have to bring a new generation to the world, which is amazing. And every reptile and every insect and every bird and every fish and every mammal and every animal and every beast knows that. The tachlis is pruervu. People forgot that in our generation. But the animal world still didn't forget it. They haven't spent too much time in university, so they're still like with the design of creation. We have become extremely sophisticated, so whatever, we have a lot of other plans. They still know there's males, there's females. They didn't go to Harvard. They would go to Harvard, then they would know there's no males, there's no females. Hamas is better than Israel, whatever, all these things. Everything is by design. Insanity too, yeah. Yeah. I hear you. So the Ramban says, but Adam, by a person is different. Right? Even a couple that's not blessed with biological children, there's a mitzvahs aina. Mitzvahs aina is a mitzvah of intimacy between a husband and a wife, in the sense that there is a value in the relationship itself. On the contrary, the children are a reflection of that relationship, of that oneness. Now, when you have two separate people coming together, at best it's two people coming together. Adam and Chava created as one represents that it's not two separate people coming together. It's one person that was separated coming back together. The chuppah is not a union, it's a reunion. So on one hand, it's two people, that's the point. On the other hand, it's two people who are capable of achieving profound oneness. But what type of oneness? Not a oneness that denies separateness and distinctiveness. A oneness that incorporates and encompasses two distinct personalities. But that can only happen when there's two distinct personalities who can create space for the other personality, for the other person. In a very practical way, a husband or a wife can't space for other people's emotions, for the other person's emotions and way of looking at the world and experiences, it's going to be very difficult. The power of a marriage you see not in couples agreeing. When they agree, it's good. It's when they disagree. That's where you'll always see a marriage. How they disagree. There was a big guru on marriage. His name is, what's his name? He did all the books. Gutman, Dr. Gutman. He wrote a lot of books. I think he interviewed 40,000 couples over the years. I mean, crazy amounts. So one of his statistics, he did a lot of research on this. He got that as a kid. He learned in yeshiva. I think today considers himself a conservative Jew. Whatever it is, Dr. Gutman. So one of his the research he does, he says like this: that they used to think that a good marriage, there's no disagreements. They always agree, at least 90% of the time. In bad marriages, they're always fighting, they're always disagreeing, there's always machloikas, right? Which should we go Pesach? Machloikas. Which should we go Shabbos? Machloikas. Which should we put the kids in school? Machloikas. Internet in the house? Machloikas. Everything is a machloikas. So that, of course, they're fighting. That's what they used to think. He says they realized that it's not the case. What he did was, till him, before him, the way they would deal with marriages was, you come into a therapist. The therapist would imagine, what to talk about, what this couple needs. They need this. And he said, no, that's not how you're supposed to do it. Let's learn from experience. It was very smart. He says, let me look at thousands of couples who have a good marriage. Let me look at thousands who have a bad marriage. Let me see the difference. And he asked them for permission to install video cameras to be able to see how they live. And then they came into his thing, like for a week, for a few days, and everything was videoed. And he wanted to see, here's a good marriage, here's a miserable marriage. What do they do right? What do they do wrong? And he did this with tens of thousands. And he said that one of the very interesting statistics is that the good marriages, they argue as much as in bad marriages. In fact, he says, even in the best marriages, 70%, 69% actually, I think, 69% of the arguments in the first week of marriage, they still have when he's 99 in Palm Beach and she's 96 in Palm Beach. Now they're sitting on the beach, he's with a pina colada, I don't know, she's with an iced coffee, whatever it is, and they still have the arguments that they had at Sheva Brachas 65 years earlier. The same 70% of the arguments weren't resolved. You know, that we put the Venetian blind down or up? Lights off, lights on. Music louder, music lower. Milchik restaurant, Fleischik restaurant. The only thing they don't argue about when he's 99 is they're going to her mother for Pesach. Because the mother is already celebrating Pesach in Olam Hamas. That's maybe the one argument that doesn't exist. All other arguments, not all, 70%. He said, and they realized that it's not connected. It's not if you argue or not. It's how they argue. It's very how they argue. Do you argue with contempt? Contempt means, how could you be so stupid to have such an opinion? So scheite, idiot, nar, ferd. Right? It's how you argue. Is it with contempt? Is it with gaslighting? Is it with stonewalling? Is it with drifting away? Is it with anger? Is it, I can't deal with you? You know, you pick up your hands in despair like yiyush. Yiyush. That never works. That's not going to work. Or you argue actually with presence. In other words, with security, with confidence. So you could say what you're feeling, and you can hear the other person's feelings, and it's not a threat to your existence. It doesn't trigger you to the point that you have to run away, fight, or flight, or freeze. All our responses. Now, you may be triggered, but you have enough mental awareness to be able to bring back your divine, to use Chassidus language, to bring back your divine soul into presence, and therefore not allow the triggers to overwhelm the relationship. Because I don't want people to think that if you have triggers, you can't have this relationship. You have triggers, but you understand what they are, and you could bring in your divinity, your divine soul into the relationship. What's the point of all of this? This is this idea of two Yetziris. You see how all this idea, it's all in the Gemara in Ksuvas. You're making a bracha at the chuppah, not for one person, for two people. You would think at the chuppah at least, come on, give them a few minutes of oneness. Like you have to ruin it right now? At the chuppah at least, tell us that we're one. Okay, in a month we'll come back for therapy. Fine. You'll tell us that we're two people. We'll come back in a year, we'll come back in 2 years. No, at the chuppah you have to ruin it. It's not one Yetzer Adam, it's 2 Yetzer Adams. I thought now, finally, Mazel Tov, in ve'agefen, bin ve'ageven, zwei beste Meshpuches in Monsey, zwei beste Meshpuches in Lakewood, sind gekommen zusammen, ehrliche jüdische Deures, Nachas, and this, yeah, la'olam vod. Emes? No, you got to ruin it. It gets even better. There's a sefer called Yam Shel Shloima by the Maharshal, Rabbeinu Shloima Luria, from Lublin, the Maharshal. He lived in the 16th century, 16th to 17th century. So the Maharshal writes in Yam Shel Shloima, I saw, maybe also in Ksuvas, I forgot where, Ksuvas, Chul, in Yam Shel Shloima I saw it. He says that, why do we break a glass under the chuppah? So everybody says, for the Churban of Yerushalayim. Marshal says no. It's a Zecher L'Shviras Haluchas. Because the Matan Torah was the marriage of God and the Jewish people. The Mishnah says, B'yom Chasunas Yisrael Matan Torah. What happened at that Chasana? What happened at the first wedding between God and the Jewish people? The luchas were broken 40 days later. So zeichel l'shviras haluchas, we break the glass under the chuppah. That's what the Marshal says. I saw it the first time, and I didn't understand. What are you telling them? That what, in 40 days you should make an egel and she should run to somebody else, or he should run to somebody else, and then you'll break the ksuva and destroy the ksuva and destroy the ring and I mean, what? The Shviras Haluchas was a tragedy. It's not. Yeah, I understand. We do it for Churban Yerushalayim. We're still in Galus. We remember the Churban Beis Hamikdash. We remember that even Alas Yerushalayim al Rosh Simchasim Ashkachich Yerushalayim Tidbak L'Shayni L'Chichi. Jews always remember Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash and the Churban. But what do you have to bring in Shviras Haluchas? A good kasha, no? So perhaps, I don't know, but perhaps you can explain it based on this. I'm not sure this is what the Marshal means. But it could be that it's actually very important to bring it into the chuppah. And the reason is because you're actually giving a very powerful message. There may be moments in which you feel that this relationship is broken. And that's where you have to remember that the luchas were broken, and God said, this relationship is over. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, no, it just has to go deeper. And that's what he does. Hashem is megala the Yidgimel Midas Harachamim, and they have a deeper relationship, and it's called luchas shniyas. So it's a tremendous comfort and empowering message to people, and not just in marriage, but generally. The chuppah represents, the ideal state. You're starting a new life. And then what the Marshal is saying is, no, things might get broken. The power of life is not how to deal with states that are not broken. It's how you repair your life after brokenness. How you lift yourself up from the abyss. That's where life happens. You understand what I'm saying? You have those few people who have ideal lives and they never break anything and they never destroy anything. Okay, Tovei Aleim Bracha, and if you could do that, Gesundheit, give us the recipe and we'll try to copy you. But everybody knows that those lives are very rare, very unique, unless you're in denial. We break things, we destroy things, willingly, unwillingly, consciously, unconsciously. So the luchas, you're breaking the glass. When I sometimes officiate, when I do a chuppah, I have my line that I say at the end of a chuppah. I say, why is the chassan breaking the glass? Everybody's screaming mazel tov. What's the mazel tov? Even if you have to break the glass for Churban Yerushalayim, what's shreit be mazel tov? It was the $10 glass, $20 glass. Why are you screaming mazel tov? So I said, so I tell the kala, I say, we want to tell you a message here. This guy under the chuppah now, he's perfect. He's impeccable, he's flawless, he's handsome, he's the most amazing guy in the planet. But sooner or later, he's going to start breaking things. That's what men do. And when he starts breaking things, learn how to say mazel tov. You're not married to an angel, you're married to a human being who has ups and downs and upheavals and goes through the vicissitudes of life. And then I tell the chassan the same thing about the kala. But what's the real nakuda? The real nakuda here is that brokenness means you're not one, you're separate. That's what breaking is. You have a cup and you glass and you break it, so it's now fragmented in two pieces or more than two pieces. And after the breaking of the luchas, the relationship didn't end. It's just Moshe Rabbeinu said, now we have to pick up the fragments and create new luchas. So now you're saying something very deep. He couldn't glue back the first luchas. You don't do that. You create the second luchas, but in a way it's much deeper. Because you retain the cracks in the second luchas. You don't get rid of the cracks. The Gemara says about Basra, Aron, luchos v'shivrei luchas menachem ba'aron. What made up the Kodesh HaKadoshim was not just the second whole luchas, it was also the broken luchas. They took the broken pieces and they put that in the aron. Not just zeichel l'churban, because the power of luchas shniyas is that it incorporates the shivrei luchas. There's something in the fragments. What we spoke a few classes ago, right? That Somebody once said, when I was young, I worshipped perfection. Now I search for things that have a crack inside of them, because that's what allows the light to come in. Leiv nishbar v'nitke lekim le'sivza. The broken luchas allow a deeper light to come in. They create a humility, a vulnerability, an authenticity. So the luchas shniyas don't forget about the luchas rishonos. They're created from the fragments. It's a wholeness that's a different type of wholeness. So right in the Aron, you had the broken pieces there. Oh, just get rid of them, put them in a museum, glue them back together, make believe nothing happened. You never make believe nothing happen. The brokenness remains present in the wholeness because it's a different type of wholeness. It's a deeper wholeness. So now when you talk about a marriage, sometimes when marriages break and then they're repaired, they have a wholeness that is much deeper. Not sometimes, always. That is much deeper than the original wholeness. Now, sometimes they don't know how to repair. They just break. We know that. We call it a get. And sometimes there's no legal divorce, but there's a spiritual divorce, an emotional divorce. But if they do bring it back together, like in the case of Moshe Rabbeinu and the Jewish people and Hashem, it's a different type of relationship. Does it have the same innocence and purity and youthful idealism? No, it doesn't. Luchas Rishonos had something special that was not replicated. Torah Shebal Peh came out of Luchas Shniyas. Torah Shebal Peh is a different type of Torah. It's a Torah of work and creativity. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin, "B'machshakim ha'yeshivani ze Talmudah shel Bavli." Talmud Bavli is called darkness in Gemara. B'machshakim, Yirmiyahu says in Eicha, God has placed me in darkness. So what does it literally mean? Yirmiyahu saw the Churban, he was put in darkness. The Gemara in Sanhedrin Chavdalet, ze Talmudah shel Bavli. God placed me in darkness is called Talmud Bavli. Learning Gemara is a confrontation with darkness. I mean, everybody should stay with that darkness. You shouldn't have other darkness. But it's a very powerful idea because Talmud Bavli versus Talmud Yerushalmi is engaging Machshakim. It's full of questions and answers and debates and refutations. It's a blueprint for Machlokes. No, I'm serious. But what type of Machlokes? Right? Everything that the Gottman said about marriage, really, if you know how to read Gemara, it's all there in any page of Gemara. It's full of Machlokes. There's not an Amid of Gemara where people are not fighting with each other, but they're not killing each other. They're just fighting with each other. How do we know it's so precious? The Beis Yosef writes in Tur, I think B'Shem Reb Hai Gon, why do we say Ezel Mekayman in the morning before davening? You know why? Because it's the one chapter of Mishnayos and Zvachim that doesn't have Machlokes. Ezel Mekayman is a perik of Mishnayos. Doesn't have. You'll see there's no Machlokes. There's no Divrei Reb Shimon, Reb Yosef, Reb Gamliel. So they put it in before davening. They were so excited. One chapter doesn't have Machlokes. The whole Shas, the whole Mishnah, the first Mishnah has a Machlokes, the last Mishnah has a Machlokes, and everything in between. Almost every perik has a Machlokes. Ready? The first Mishnah has a Machlokes when you read Krishma, till when you could read Krishma at night. The second Mishnah, the second Machlokes, when you read Krishma in the morning. They're arguing about everything. The third Mishnah has a Machlokes, how you read Krishma. But that wasn't it. That's not a problem. The problem is not the machlokes. The problem is how they argue. They don't argue with contempt. You never see Rava looks at Abaya and say, "How could you be so stupid to say what you're saying?" He never says that. It's not he doesn't say. He doesn't feel it. Right? That's how a husband and a wife have to be married. How could you be so stupid? There's contempt. There's dismissiveness. There's no space for the other. When there's no space for the other, it's a disaster. So, b'meila, the separateness is a chelik of the union. So on one hand, they're one because when they're coming together, it's not two separate people coming together as an additional prize, but rather it's like two halves of one. Machzis ha-shekel. Machzis ha-shekel, not a whole shekel, because I'm half, you're half, and together we become one. On the other hand, what's pshat we become one? We become one. Like I said last time, the marriage between Hashem and the Jewish people happened in the third month. Because it's not month 1, it's not month 2, it's month 3. Hakasav hashlishi ve'achriya beinehem. This third pasuk doesn't choose sides. The third pasuk incorporates both psukim. Yachriya beinehem. Halacha kedivrei machriya. You bring them together. That's already a different art. You first taste the Inyan. So that's the two Yitziris. That's the two Yitziris in Machshava and the one Yitzira in Maisa. And that's the Pshat in the Panim Yafis, that on the level of Machshava, it's two. And that's what you say at Sheva Brachas. What do I mean by contempt? You're saying, is it looking down at the other person, or is it not respecting their opinion? I think on a deeper level, it's probably the same thing. I think so. But I would just add, it's not just not respecting your opinion because intellectually I disagree. Or basically I think you don't know the facts, or it's ludicrous, or you're not learning from previous experience, or you're just doing the same thing over and over, and come on, you saw the disaster that happened last month, and therefore how can you even think of all this? I'm just saying what goes through a person's mind, right? And generally, you know how immature you are, and you know how insecure you are, and you're just like your mother, and she's just like her mother, and here you go again, and huh? That's one level, but there's also something else which directly leads to that and feeds off that, and that is the person feeling very triggered. The person feeling triggered is that the person is getting so upset. There's something that's getting me so anxious, so angry. It's almost that you having this opinion doesn't allow me to stay still. It doesn't allow me to remain tranquil in my lane. That has nothing to do with her opinion. That has to do with something that is being triggered inside of me because of a wound that I never dealt with. And that's where it becomes much more subtle and much more tricky. Because if it's just, I disagree with your opinion, okay, so you disagree with my opinion, fine. Why are you so triggered? Why are you so triggered? When the intellectualism is really camouflaging an emotional wound. I'll argue and I have to prove you wrong, and I'll bring you rayas, and now suddenly I think I'm back in yeshiva with my wife. And I'll bring rayas, and I'll bring another raya, and then I'll even open a Shulchan Aruch and show you what the Taz says. That's going to help the marriage a lot. Let's call the Rav. What's the Rav going to do? Heal your trauma? just triggered 50 years of wounds. Okay. The Rav can tell you what it says in Shulchan Aruch. Fine, maybe sometimes you need that. But usually that's not the issue. So there we have to be very careful. It's very subtle. In other words, there's something that happened just now that invalidated me. Now you think, what? We were just talking about a Sheva Brachas. We're talking about who's coming for Shabbos. I mean, what just happened? We weren't talking about the future of the universe. We're talking about who's coming for Shabbos. That's what we were talking about. But what it represented was something very deep. The Shalah writes, when you look at a star from here, the star looks like a cholent bean. Star looks like a dreidel, right? If you go a little closer, the star could be billions of times larger than the sun. Right? It's also true in life. Sometimes you say something is very, very small. It's like a star. If you go deeper, it's not a small star, it's huge. The argument could be about who's coming for Shabbos, right? What are we doing for Hanukkah? Are we going to that Hanukkah party? It's a star, it's nothing. It's really nothing. It's going to be forgotten in a few hours. But it's not nothing, because for the person it's representing the fact that I was invalidated as a child and I'm being invalidated again. I was abandoned as a 3-year-old and I'm being abandoned again. I wasn't understood then, I'm not understood now. I wasn't respected then, I'm not respected now. I was considered an idiot then, I'm considered an idiot now. My needs didn't matter then, my needs don't matter now. That's big. Trust me, it's big. So what's happening is we're not arguing. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel were actually arguing. They weren't invalidating each other. That's why they could respect each other. Okay, it's a different perspective. What happens in so many arguments is, it's personal. You're triggering me. You're making me feel like a mess inside. Of course I'm going crazy. It has nothing to do with arguing. So now, but I'm not ready to face that. So what do? Contempt. I say, b'sta shaita. What do you gain by doing that? You're a shaita, you're uneducated, you're illiterate. What do you gain by that? You gain by that you don't have to deal with your own emotions. You're an idiot, that's it. You didn't invalidate me. How can an idiot invalidate me? And of course I have to win, but it's not really I have to win. If I don't win, it's telling me that I'm a loser at my core. We're not you understand?
I don't have to win as long as I don't lose.
If a couple is arguing, it's not an issue. But they're usually not arguing. They're usually triggering each other's terrible, terrible wounds. Which is normal. It's normal. And to acknowledge that and accept that and say, yeah, and I could stay in that space. I could stay in that space, and it's very, very scary space to be in. Then it becomes a tremendous fight. Or I can go into a different space. I can hold space for this, but go into a different space. So that's what happens with contempt. It's not easy because when it gets triggered, it's very powerful. Empathy is very important because empathy, midas harachamim, allows you to hold space for your own pain, and then you can hold space for somebody else's pain. If you don't have empathy for yourself, it's very hard to have it for somebody else. I don't think it works. It's not. In a very real way to have empathy, it's only if you have it for yourself, because it's an emotion. It's like a muscle. You have to use it. If you use it in yourself, you experience it. You can experience it with other people. In fact, people who don't have empathy for themselves, it's very hard for them to have empathy for others because they're telling themselves, I can't afford this for myself. I put one foot ahead of another foot and move on. Like, why should you be different? So we project to others, what we do to ourselves. I heard a woman saying the other day, who was on a podcast, she said that her whole life, like she saw her children are triggering her terribly, and like she needed to whip them into a certain behavior. And then as she got older, she did some work and she realized that it was just, they were triggering her own discomfort. Like, how did I deal with this pain in myself? I just repressed it and I moved on. I didn't have empathy for it. No, my mother didn't have empathy for it. She also moved on. So you want me to have empathy for your thing? Like, then it's going to bring up so many stuff that we don't bring up. So if I could just get my kids to, move on and fit the model that my mother wanted and her mother wanted and her mother wanted, then everything will be good. Empathy is a very different place. Empathy is you have to sit with, you have to hold space for things that are uncomfortable. But in that holding space, I actually don't become a victim to it. By holding space by identifying it, you can actually look at it and you're not part of the problem. Because you can see it and then you can quarantine it, and then you could make choices. You could make choices in a much deeper way. That's the power of it. So in a very practical way, your wife may say something to you, your husband may say something to you, and it may trigger you very deeply. This argument is now turning from an argument into 2-3-year-old children dealing with wounds. It happens very, very fast. Remember, the body remembers everything. So when my wife tells me something, or my husband tells me something, or my child tells me something, or my friend tells me something, the body already, before they finish the sentence, the body is already responding. You have to remember, your body is a gon olam. Your body is a genius like no genius. Everybody's body can win the Nobel Prize 100 times a day. Your body remembers everything. It doesn't have to remember it. It's stored in its consciousness and it reacts like this. It's one of the nefloyos habayra of survival. So by the time my wife or my husband or whoever finishes the sentence, the body already formulated a response, even before you process it in your mind. Your mind is slow. Your mind is very slow. Your mind just thinks 5 seconds. No, the body was already there before the sentence was finished. In fact, the body doesn't have to hear sentences. The body feels energy and facial reactions. The body picks up already when you came into the room. She didn't even have to say anything. Your wife walked into the room and said, I have to talk to you. Even before the words came out, your body already formulated a whole response. Your body already wrote a whole mesechta. It's called Meseches Gittin. A ganze mesechta with Rashi, Tosfos, Marsha, Maram Shif, and the Rashash, and the Bakiv and even the Rashba. Your body already has a whole marach, a whole sugya. It's already planned. The next 3 hours, your body already, it's all there. Like a chip in a computer. It's like artificial intelligence. You put in the question, before you finish the sentence, they already have a Megillah written. They have already 90 pages of text. You now got to catch up, slowpoke. You got to catch up because you're slow. The body is beyond artificial intelligence. Remember, the body's intelligence is from the divine. So it's a different level of intelligence. It doesn't go through our processes that we have to go through. In the womb, yeah, of course. It's crazy what it learns. It's unbelievable. So it's right away prepared. So the body already formulated a response. Huh? There's a mind in the body. The body has a mind. It builds buildings and it reaches conclusions and it knows how to respond and so on and so forth. And how do we even begin to deal with this? Only by noticing, by observing it, and by having a lot of compassion and empathy for it. So just her walking into the room, or you walking into the room, or your child walking into the room, just the body language, forget the words, the body language, the energy. If there's a smile or there's no smile, it's already, the person is very, very triggered. You know, people who deny all this, and they even make fun of this conversation, like, you know, psychobabble. I've never heard anybody who like really is honest with themselves and does inner work who makes fun of this. Because everybody deals with this. Like if you make fun of this, you know, you can make fun of sunrise, you can make fun of sunset. It's like what nobody I mean, maybe I'm sure there's Malachi Elyon who, you know, maybe don't even understand this. But these are real things. You know, people who deny when somebody says, I never get triggered. Just, you know, look at their body language when they say that. I never get triggered. Right. They're so triggered, it's not called a trigger, it's reality. That's it is. It's an automatic, it's not called a trigger. At least you call it a trigger. You realize, oh wow, I was triggered. This person is like, this is life. What else is there besides triggered? Trigger it's the default mode. Trigger, boom, 24/7. In other words, I'm not even aware. You know, and that's worse than anything. You know, when there's awareness, at least there's awareness. Viktor Frankl once said, I think I quoted this a few times, he said, between stimuli and reaction, there's a moment. And that's where all human freedom lie. It's just a split moment. There's the stimuli. The body is already uptight. The body knows what to say. But there's like a split moment. And if you have that moment and you're like, wow. So there's an I that is free and it can observe it. And then say, wow, that's intense. Wow, yes, I'm invalidated. Oh, wow, you're triggering the living daylights out of me. You know, somebody who says that honestly, this is where honesty is. This is where relationships grow. When somebody could say, oh yeah, that was threatening. Yeah. And how old is that piece? Oh, it's 2 years old. Maybe it's 6 years old. Maybe it's 1 year old. It was threatening, yeah.
If you respond this way, she will be triggered 10 times more.
Oh. Depends where the other person is. If the other person is in a space also of awareness and growth, so maybe not that moment, but it's very, very valuable maybe a few hours later or the next day to have a conversation and just say, you know, when you came into the room and said those words, even before you said those words, when I saw your face, I felt very, very uptight. I became very, very threatened. I became very insecure. I got very angry. I felt a lot of pain. I felt like I was worthless. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with my wounds. Now the other person can respond, wow, that's so painful. Wow, I'm sorry that this is what you're going through. And that's how the other person made space for it. That's where there's amazing healing, because people make space for these wounds, for each other. And then the next time they can actually bring it up even faster. And then at some point, the triggers change or even eliminated.
What if the triggers trigger each other? So there's no conversation at all.
That's where the challenge is. My trigger, when I'm triggered, right? I'm triggered, so that will trigger your trauma. Your trauma will trigger my trauma even more, which will trigger your trauma even more. After an hour of conversation, you're living in New Zealand emotionally, I'm living in Peru, and now go figure it out. You understand? And anything we're talking about is completely irrelevant. Everybody's in a completely different space. So this is where I hold compassion. I say, wow, look what just happened. And instead of going down that rabbit hole and just being consumed by it and responding from it, I can take a deep breath and I could say, I am in a survival mode. My nefesh Bahamas is very, very scared. It's just very, very scared. It needs to control things. And it's right away going to make decisions. Oh, I can't be married to this person. Never again. Like it already, I told you, it wrote a whole Masechta Gittin. By the time this conversation is over, there's 90 blot of Masechta Gittin there. Or any other Masechta. Could be Masechta Zvachim. Masechta Makis is noch a Masechta. They once said, the Rambam wrote 14 Svarim to divide halacha, 14 Svarim. Mada, Avas, Manim, Noshim, Kedusha, Hafla, Zroim, Avodah, Karbonis, Taran, Ezikin, Kinyan, Mishpatim, Shaiftim. All halacha goes into these 4. This is the Rambam's own dissection of halacha. So they said once an anecdote that the Rambam was thinking, where should he put in all the halachas connected with men and women and their relationship? So he went to different demographics of Klal Yisrael to ask them. So I'm not going to say the names, you'll have to figure out the demographics themselves. But one of them told the Rambam, clearly Nizikin. Clearly, or anything men and women, put it into in the field of Nizikin. Shar Shanagach and all those things. Tam, Muad, Mave, Shar, Boir, whatever, Hever, Arba, Avos Nizikin. So Zayin, Chavdalad, Avos Nizikin. That depends on your marriage. If it's Arba, if it's Chavdalad, whatever, the Gemara discusses different Avos Nizik. That's what one person told him. Another person, who was already a briske, he said, no, it's kinyan. It's a din in kinyan. It's an acquisition. Ha'isha niknas, yeah? So somebody else told him. And he came to a fine Yid and he said, it's Tara. It's all about Tara. Sefer Tara. Somebody says, maybe he was from Gary, he said, it's Kedusha, Sefer Kedusha. It all has to go into Kedusha. And then, of course, he came to somebody a little more modern and he said, of course, Sefer Ahava. It's all about love, And the other person is, Mada, keep your mind sober when you're married. And no, somebody said it's Sefer Zmanim. It all depends on the seasons and the periods. It's Al Zmanim, like relax. It just depends on the day, depends on the week, depends on the month, right? Another person said it belongs in Sefer Zirayim. It's going to end up in the Erd anyway. And so forth. And this one said it's an Avoida. And then there was one who said it's Karbonis. It's Sefer Karbonis. The question is, you'll be the carbon, she'll be the carbon, the kids will be the carbon. Right? Another one said, maybe in Manhattan, Mishpatim, you're going to end up in the court anyway. And Shaiftim, just make sure you have a good judge. Anyway, the Rambam did not listen to any of them. And he made a sefer called Noshim. You understand the brilliance of the Rambam? He had a sefer called Noshim. Es ist nicht kein Maden, es ist nicht kein Ava, es ist nicht kein Zmanim, es ist nicht kein Gedisha, es ist nicht kein Ziruyim, nicht kein Avoide, nicht kein Karbonis, es ist nicht kein Taren, nicht kein Nezikin, nicht kein Kinyan, nicht Mishpatim, nicht Shvachtim. It's something called Sefer Noshim. That's the Rambam. You understand? It's not a din, nicht in Taris, and nicht in Nezikin, and nicht in Avoide, and nicht in Kedusha. It's not a din in Kedusha. It's a Sefer called Noshim. And that's why there's 2 Yaitzers. There's one for Adam and there's one for Chava. But it's a very powerful idea when you think about it in terms of life. There's an entity, there's a person here. But the only way you can really respect a second person, the woman, is if you can also respect the man. If Adam doesn't think that he was created by God, he'll never think that Chava was created by God. If Adam knows that he was formed by God, then he knows that Chava was also formed by God. And that's why it's the same words, Yoitzer ha'Adam. Yoitzer, Baruch atah Hashem, Yoitzer ha'Adam. Why are you repeating the same words? Because it's mamish the same thing. Once Adam knows that he was formed by God, now he can respect the fact that Chava was also formed by God. If you don't realize you were formed by God, you don't realize it in anybody else. So here you see how everything comes together. Only when you can go back to your own identity and truly validate it from within and say, I was formed by God, can you experience that? Can I experience that? Can I experience my divine formation? I'm not just a wounded, broken, fragmented, destroyed, spoiled, lonely, devastated, insecure child who's always chasing after someone else, who's looking for somebody to validate them, who's living in terrible fear and dread and insecurity, who needs somebody else's validation, who needs somebody else's friendship. I'm not a person who's too needy. I'm not a person who's essentially strange and therefore I have to hide myself. Or whatever the other messages that our coping mechanisms develop in our life. But you can go back to Yotzer Ha'adam. You were formed by the divine. And what did God form? Show me the child that God formed. Show him to me. How messed up is he? Or how messed up is she? Show me. Right, the Gemara says in Maseches Tainis that there was a Jew who met Rabbi Elazar ben Reb Shimon, and he gave him Shalom Aleichem, and Rabbi Elazar ben Reb Shimon told him, you're so ugly. So he told Rabbi Elazar ben Reb Shimon, it's in Tainis Daf Chaf, he says, Leich l'uman sha'asa'ani, go to the craftsman who made me and tell him, Kama mechur kli zeh sha'asisa. Tell the craftsman who made me, how ugly is this vessel that you formed. Wow. So Elazar ben Reb Shimon asked him forgiveness, asked him for forgiveness. What's the whole point here? The point is that Elazar ben Reb Shimon, obviously, he was a big tzaddik. He saw that there was an ugliness here. He was trying to help this person. He didn't only mean physical ugliness, he meant spiritual ugliness. And the person responded very profoundly. He said, before you want to talk about my ugliness, I'm fine if you talk about my ugliness, but we have to talk about something before my ugliness. I want to know who formed this vessel, who created this vessel. Go back to the craftsman who made me and tell him this is an ugly vessel. Could you look back at the vessel that was formed? There was a craftsman who made me. I know that there is wounds, and I know that there's fragments, and I know that there's shivrei luchas, that this vessel has been broken. But this vessel was formed by a creator, by a craftsman, by an uman. Before you see that, don't talk about the ugliness of the vessel, because you're not seeing anything. You're not seeing the right thing. You know, you look at a child, destroyed, distraught, perturbed. You look at anybody. I get it. I know that's a broken vessel. We know that. There's shivrei luchas. But can you also see first, there's an uman sha'asoi, there's a craftsman. If you don't see that, then stay at home. Then don't start talking to me about how ugly I am. Because you're just, it's your own wounds that you're seeing. You're projecting, like the Baal Shem Tov says, everybody is a mirror. First, you have to see the uman sha'asoi. You always have to see that. I may not be capable of seeing that. Fine. The reason you're not capable of seeing it in somebody else is because you don't see it in yourself. If you see it in yourself, you could see it in somebody else also. So that's why you must say Yotzer Adam. When Adam knows that God formed him, then he's not looking to Chava to tell him that he's divine. When he's not looking to Chava to tell him that he's divine, if Chava has a separate personality and she has her own journey, it doesn't invalidate him because he knows Yotzer Ha'adam. So now he can create space for Chava too. But if he doesn't think he was formed by God, meaning not he doesn't think, he doesn't feel it, so now he needs Chava to replace God. You can't put this pressure on your wife to replace God. Sorry. I know Jewish wives are like gods, but they're still not God. People put too much pressure on their wife. They want their wife to replace God. Your wife doesn't replace God and your husband doesn't replace God. Let God be God so they can be people. That's the second word, Yotzer Ha'adam. Right, I just had an epiphany. If there's a Yotzer, then an Adam could be an Adam. God could be God, so the person could be a person. Your wife is not God. Your husband is not God. Don't put on your wife the pressure to form you and make you and give you dignity. That's God's job. Find God. He created you. Leich l'uman sha'asa'acha. Go find the craftsman that made you. You're good. Now your spouse can be your spouse. Now you can have real respect. You can make space for another. Because if the other has to be there to make me feel good, there's no other. There's just me. You can't make space for the other person. The moment the other person is in a bad mood or having an intense day, it invalidates me, and now I go crazy, and now I'm upset at you, and now you're triggering me, I'm triggering you, and it's a mess. Now, are we going to liberate ourselves from this after this shiur? Maybe, I'm not sure. We're going to continue to trigger each other, but when you have awareness of it, you could say, yeah, my animal soul got very, very scared. I get it. My animal soul doesn't know that I have a uman sha'asani. It thinks I'm really ugly. So I could breathe, I could have compassion, and I could choose to step into the Yotzer Ha'adam, to my divine soul, which is very eager to have real connection, and is full of love. Not love from insecurity, but love from expansiveness. Verstehst? You came at the right moment. So that's the two Yitziris. So that's why we celebrate in the chuppah not the one Yotzer. Lahalacha, we say two Yotzer Adams. We don't just say they're one, Adam and Chava are one, they came back together, Baruch Hashem, they're one. It's true. That's a powerful idea, and that's the other shit in Gemara. But lahalacha, we paskin, we say two Yotzer Adams. Not only because we have another person in the family to give an extra kibbut to. The Gemara could have said the reason he made all Sheva brachas is because he knew somebody's going to get disappointed. But as I told you, he made all the Sheva brachas. So it's not just to give an extra kibbut. It's because fundamentally there's a very powerful idea here. That the machshava of separation is very, very real. Because that's the achdus of Adam and Chava. It's the unity that comes from togetherness. Togetherness means it's not just one and it's not two, it's three. That's the chuppah that brings them together. That's why Sheva brachas is done by the chuppah. It's like the makif, Soiv of Kalama, that brings the chassan and kala together. I want to welcome Rabbi Pinchas Krieger from Yerushalayim. It's one of the pillars of our shir for many years. Straight from the airport, straight from Eretz Yisrael. The first stop was here. Bruchim Abayim. You remember Rabbi Pinchas Krieger? Can I say the joke about Ben Shmona Esrei L'chuppah? If you give me permission. I could?
Yeah. My wife's youngest daughter, 32, invited us to Motzei Shabbos.
The wedding?
Motzei Shabbos, the Vard.
Oh, the Vard. Mazel Tov. Wow. So Rabbi Krieger, he got married, second marriage to his wife, Larichas Yamim V'Shanim Toivus, 27 years ago. They each came into the marriage from this was their second marriage, and each of them had 9 children from their first marriage. So this was a blended family of 9 children that then, and when they got married, he brought in 9 children from the first marriage, and she brought in 9 children from the first marriage. So somebody met him in shul when he got married the second time, and he said, now I understand what the Mishnah means, Ben Shmona Esrei L'chuppah. When you go to the chuppah, you should have 18 children. So he went to the chuppah with 18 children, Kanai and Hannah. So, and it worked. It worked. Larichis Yamim V'Shanim Toivus. Huh? Ben Shmona Esrei L'chuppah. But it doesn't mean that for everybody. Okay. Everybody have a beautiful and inspiring day with both Yotzer Adams, mit beide Yotzer Adams. Oopsie. Next week, I'm not here for a few days. I think everybody's on the WhatsApp group of the shir. Huh? Okay, so now there's probably going to be Thursday and Friday the shir. Because I have a different schedule next week, yeah.
Monday, yes?
No, Monday not. Probably Thursday and Friday, but I'm going to confirm on the WhatsApp, Bli Neder. Everybody have a lot of hatzlacha. Psuris Toivus. Was machte, Bruchim Aboyim, Shalom Aleichem, von Arzeinu HaGdoisha. Oh, Yeshakaya. Beautiful word you just sent me from him. Vatesa. Beautiful word. Beautiful word. Chazer li Gelulei Beis Aviyah. He was in Lezhensk, yeah?
Yeah, Shabbos.
You went? No.
Okay.
Ah, it's the Chakaya, yeah. Okay. I'm heading to Toronto now.
When are you leaving?
Mamash in a few minutes.
Tuesday you'll be home.